This is Nari from Into the Night Anthology podcast, and you are listening to Tale of the Manticore.
The following podcast is intended for a mature audience. Listener discretion is advised. Welcome back to Tale of the Manticore, Season 2. Like the creature from which it takes its name, Tale of the Manticore is a mashup, a crossbreeding between two different species of storytelling. Here you will find the unpredictability of old-school RPG paper and dice games with the storycraft of a dark fantasy novel. No character is sacred, and no character will be spared if the dice decide their fate is at hand. According to lore, the tail of a manticore is barbed with cruel iron spikes. There will be much pain in the days ahead. Last time on Tale of the Manticore. The last chapter picks up with the party negotiating the pool room. Jace falls in, but even though he cannot swim, thanks to the precautionary use of a rope, he is hauled to the other side with relative ease. Only Catsbane notices that the disturbance in the water has caught the attention of some terrible thing deep down below. In the next room, the companions must deal with a kind of puzzle trap. Touching a magical sphere on a pedestal causes a secret door to slide down and open, but in order to operate the device, one person must submit to being electrocuted by arcane energies. Catsbane tries his magical Dagger of Negation, but the attempt fails, and in the end, Yellowfly takes the ordeal upon himself. Once the others pass through the secret door, Jace discovers a second magical orb, and holds the door open for Yellowfly, taking minor damage as well. With these hazards behind them, the companions next discover a room dedicated to a statue of a kneeling man. The statue appears to have been designed to hold something. Whatever that thing is, it isn't there anymore, and the party moves to the final room in this section of the ruins. Here, they come across the same door with a face that stymied Carrick Malmar for so long, and which, though they do not know it, marks the true entrance to the demon's lair. Chapter 69, Part 1, Day 183, Night. Party status: Yellowfly, 27 of 44 hit points. Shawnee, 32 of 33. Jace, 40 of 45. Catsbane, 16 of 21. Bazu, 18 of 21. Spells available. Catsbane has memorized Magic Missile, Invisibility, Mirror Image, Haste, and Slow. Bazu has prayed for Cure Light Wounds, Bless, and Silence 15-foot radius. They had been in the room for over an hour by the time Yellowfly called a break. He beckoned his companions to join him, where he sat on one of several stone blocks that, some time long ago, had fallen loose from the ceiling. From all corners of the room came his companions, looking both dejected and anxious. When they had first arrived, wary from all the dangers previously faced, they had investigated the door with an abundance of caution. The gigantic metal countenance was a caricature of misery, its grotesque features sagging and fallen. In particular, Shawnee had inspected it at length. She discovered no danger in it, but neither did she find any way to open it. There was no handle, lock, nor hinges. When Yellowfly and Jace tried to push them open, the doors would not budge. It seemed that this was as far as they were going to get. After studying the door, Shawnee had checked every wall. Bazu had prayed for guidance, while Yellowfly and Jace had discussed possible ways to force the door open. Catsbane seemed lost in thought, and mostly just stared at the door, returning its frown. He was the last to join Yellowfly and the others where they sat on the stone blocks. "I'm out of ideas. There's a lot that still bothers me about all of this," he began. "The stairs from Colfrey's dungeon were not part of the original design. Someone dug their way in here, but we've yet to find any other way to the surface. How did anyone get in here before the stairs existed? I can't make any sense of it."
"Unless this isn't the entrance,"
posited Bazu. "Right, but then how do you explain that thing?" Yellowfly pointed at the face on the door. "Surely that must be the front. And that's not the only thing that doesn't add up, added Shawnee. This place is centuries old. Where are the cobwebs and the dust? Nobody had any answer for that. Yellowfly let out a sigh of defeat. None of this matters if we can't move beyond those doors,
I have no great desire to go back the way we came,
said Catsbane. Inside, he was conflicted. He did not want to go forward either,
I have prayed for guidance,
said Bazu unhappily.
and I still do not know what we should do.
He ran a hand down over his face.
But I must believe that Sadal has brought us here for a reason.
Well, if your god can't open those doors, we might have no choice but to turn back. Yellowfly's words bordered on sacrilege, but Bazu let it pass. It was late. Everyone was tired, and some of them were wounded,
The answer will come.
said the cleric mildly.
We just need to think.
What do you suppose I've been doing for the last hour, Bazu? Yellowfly bristled.
We need to think more.
Bazu said patiently. He knew that his companion's frustration did not come from him, but from his inability to solve the problem. Yellowfly was their leader. He suddenly realized what a great burden that must be. The fighter put his elbows on his knees and rested his chin in his hands. Then he slumped, defeated. After a moment, he said, "Well, I'm out of ideas. I don't know what we should do."
Perhaps,
Bazu began in a soothing voice.
perhaps we should rest here a while. And Yellowfly, I know you took a wound back there. Let me help you.
Yellowfly stared at the floor for a few moments, then over at the enormous frowning face on the door, and finally at his friend. "All right," he said at last. Bazu has a point. It's late and the PCs need sleep. Yellowfly will arrange a watch, giving himself the first shift, followed by Bazu, Jace, Shawnee, and finally, Catsbane. Before they rest, Bazu will use the last of his Cure Light Wounds spells on Yellowfly. I would have preferred it if he could have used it on Catsbane, but I think Bazu is probably making the wiser choice by healing Yellowfly. The fighter will get 1d6 plus 1 hit points back. Here's the roll. A 3 on the die is 4 points, increasing Fly's current total to 31. Additionally, each PC who's not already at their maximum will get 1 hit point restored through natural healing. I don't know about you, but my suspicion is that this will be the last time the PCs will get the chance to rest and recharge before their adventure comes to an end.
What's wrong?
Sputtered Catsbane in alarm. He was half asleep and someone was shaking him. "It's just me, Catsbane," came Shawnee's familiar voice in the darkness. "Rouse yourself. It's your watch."
What happened to the lights?
They had been using his little lamp to conserve the lantern's fuel during watches. "I don't need light to keep watch," came Shawnee's answer. "Here." There was a little scraping sound, and then a spark, as Shawnee used her tinderbox to relight the lamp.
You might have done that before waking me.
Catsbane quipped, rubbing his eyes.
You scared me half to death, Shawnee.
"Sorry, I didn't think of it." She passed him the lamp, which now emitted a feeble light, and then repeated, "It's your watch," before turning over on her side and curling up on the floor to sleep. In a few seconds, she was snoring. Catsbane marveled at the rogue's ability to fall asleep quickly, especially here, with that awful maudlin face looming over them. In the gloom, Catsbane's lamplight played like flames over the metal curves of its cheekbones and caused the pupils to flash as though they were made from polished gold. It was difficult to concentrate at first when Catsbane pulled his spellbook from his pack and began flipping through its pages in his daily routine of meditation and study. But by and by he became adequately attuned to the arcane. Once his concentration was steady, he created a mental bond with the extraplanar creature from which he drew a portion of his power. He maintained the link as he copied 2 new spells into his spellbook. Although he did not communicate with the creature in words, they conversed only through the language of magic. Catsbane could sense its anxiety. After completing the inscription of the second spell, the powerful Dimension Door, he put away his book, quill, and special inks. For what felt like a long time, he contemplated the tragic face on the door. It gave shape to his mingled feelings of guilt, desire, self-loathing, and responsibility. Finally, he made a decision, and in the quietest of whispers, spoke the name that haunted the labyrinth of his mind.
Azor.
At the utterance, the huge metal face split down the middle, as he knew they would. As he wished they would not, the doors swung open.
The Save for Half podcast covers old school gaming and the modern games inspired by them. Listen in to hear about games from the 70s and 80s as well as their modern descendants. You can download episodes wherever podcasts are found on iTunes, Google, and other fine podcast distributors. You should also check them out on saveforhalf.com or email them at saveforhalfpodcasts@gmail.com.
Chapter 69, Part 2, Day 184. Morning. Party status. Yellowfly, 32 of 44 hit points. Shawnee, 33 of 33. Jace, 40 of 45. Catsbane, 17 of 21. Bazu, 19 of 21. Spells available. Catsbane is memorized. Detect Magic, Magic Missile, Web, Mirror Image, Haste, Slow, and Dimension Door. Bazu has prayed for Cure Light Wounds, Light, Find Traps, Locate Object, and Cure Serious Wounds. One by one, Catsbane woke up his companions and showed them that the door with the face was now wide open. But he hadn't roused them right away. For an hour before, Catsbane had sat in meditation, looking into the darkness of the newly exposed hallway. He felt unsettled. Had he done the right thing? When he had said the name to open the doors, he had done so because the alternative was unbearable. For the rest of his life, he would be haunted by an evil voice in his thoughts and in his dreams. It was better to face it once and for all. That's what he told himself anyway. But wasn't part of him still drawn to the promise of power?
It just happened, all on its own.
He lied when asked how he had managed to open the doors. The companions did not pass through them right away. Bazu insisted that he spend an hour in prayer before they continued. Concerned that the door would close while the cleric prayed, or worse, behind them later on, Yellowfly and Jace had worked together, pushing 2 heavy stone blocks against them. Since the doors opened inward, they also moved one to a spot in the middle, where Yellowfly calculated they would meet if they did try to close. It was Jace who noticed that the door's face had changed.
"I'll be damned,"
He breathed.
"It's laughing now."
He was right. Both halves of the metal face were now frozen in an expression of mirth. The cheekbones were lifted and the mouth, with lips together, curled up at each side in a smile. "More sorcery," spat Yellowfly. He was not in good humor. His hand still hurt from touching the orb on the previous day, despite Bazu's healing ministrations. "I'd rather be in Kulfri's dungeon. At least there I knew what I was up against." Jace's mood was no better. He had slept in wet clothes, and his boots were still soggy from yesterday's dunking.
Maybe we should move a couple more blocks.
You might have noticed that I switched both spellcasters' usual choice of spells. Given what they went through recently, Find Traps, for example, makes much more sense than Silence 15-foot radius. Bazu also took a Light spell over one of the usual pair of Cure Light Wounds. That was a tough decision, but I'd gotten to thinking that the PCs had been walking around in the dark for quite a while. It's fair to assume that they would have come to Whitestone equipped with a day's worth of lantern oil, but by now, they must be running low. How low? I don't know, because, rightly or wrongly, I didn't track this resource. Usually I don't see the need. Heresy, I know, but I do now, so I need to make a decision. I could go with a usage die, or I could go with a set amount. I like aspects of both methods. The usage die comes with a nail-biting, danger just around the corner aspect that really appeals. But I'm actually going to use the fixed amount. This is because, as the PCs continue into the ruins, they will really lose track of time of day. From here on in, their diminishing lantern fuel will become a countdown clock that will replace time of day in the chapter intros. I'll say that they'll have a D4 plus 2 hours of lantern oil remaining. Here's the roll. Oh hell, I got a 1. Bazu had his eyes closed and his holy symbol held in front of them as he whispered a prayer.
Amen.
After the last word was spoken, he opened his eyes and declared that the way forward was free of any traps, magical or mundane. Yellowfly and Jace took the lead then, passing through the split face of the double doors with Bazu and Catsbane behind them, and Shawnee bringing up the rear. They were in a long hallway that sloped down. It was 10 feet across, and stretched ahead as far as their light would reach. They made their way forward slowly, despite Bazu's guarantee that the hall was free of traps. The only sound was the noise of their footfalls as they continued. After a few minutes, they could no longer see the double doors with the face on it when they looked over their shoulders. There was nothing but hallway and darkness, before and behind. There was a feeling in here that was hard to describe. It was a bit like having a weight on your heart. They all felt it, but even though Catsbane did more than the rest of them, it was Yellowfly who brought it up. "I can feel something. Something inside." He did not have the words to elaborate, but the others all murmured their agreement and said that they sensed it too. After a few seconds, Yellowfly spoke again. "Catsbane, is this feeling some kind of magic?" The young wizard seemed at a loss for words, but eventually he managed.
Yes and no? I don't think the feeling is magical per se, but I do believe we have entered into some kind of, well, different place, Yellowfly.
Yellowfly was not much put at ease. Different place. Different how exactly?
The material world, the world in which we exist and which we experience through our senses. It's by no means the only world. Others are layered atop it, like onion skins.
He knew he wasn't explaining it properly, but he had no skill for this kind of thing. In his experience, people could either sense the esoteric, or they could not.
Perhaps Bazu could put it into words better than I can.
"I think I might be able to explain," said Shawnee, surprising everyone. "Go on then," said Yellowfly. "Well, the explanation isn't really mine. You know, back at the Harpy in Domo, when Tamlin was caring for me and healing my burns, he would often tell me stories and parables." She could keenly feel Tam's little key around a cord at her throat now as she remembered her fallen friend. "Did he ever tell you the last parable of Sha-Tun?" "No, but I'd most like to hear it, or anything to get my mind off this place. Please go on." "All right, I'll try to remember it the way he told it to me." The Parable of the Blackness of Mulberries. One day, Sha-Tun was walking in the woods with his great friend, Caton Hume. Caton was a novice priest of Sadal and a scholar of supreme erudition, but he was also a humble and loyal friend who always spoke to Sha-Tun as an equal, even though the latter had never taken any formal education at all. They were in the Brentwood, in a place just west of the area now known as the Holloway. Back then it was called the Hallowed Way, and opposite the church of Sadal, where Caton lived and worked. They would often take these walks together and discuss all manner of things. This day was a bright midsummer afternoon, and it was perfect. The sky overhead was blue, the trees and ferns were fragrant, and the birds sang with carefree joviality. The two men were walking, content in a rare moment without conversation, when Sha-Tun suddenly stopped Caton and pointed up to a mulberry tree. Its berries had turned from red to black and were ripe and ready for eating. Like two children, the pair set about laughing and picking fruit. Sha-Tun popped berry after juicy berry into his mouth, while Caton simply picked them to later give away. Sha-Tun noticed this and asked his friend why he did not eat any himself, to which Caton replied that he did not care for the tart taste of mulberries, even when they were as ripe as these ones. This led Sha-Tun to ask the kind of question that Caton liked best, a question of pure, innocent curiosity, and one most folks would never ask, either because they were incurious or because they would have felt silly in the asking. Neither of these things was true for Sha-Tun, so he asked why it was that, while all people shared the same basic anatomy, the same tongue, the same lips, the same teeth, so many people could have different tastes in food. "A worthy question," Caton had replied, "and for that matter, one might well ask why some folks preferred one kind of art to another, though they shared the same kind of eyes, or different music when most ears are, more or less, made the same." Many would have laughed or shrugged or dropped the idea then, but not Sha-Tun. He stopped picking and eating berries and sat down on a fallen log to think.
"Is it possible,"
he asked,
"that the flavor I experience of the mulberry when I eat it is not the same taste that you experience?"
Caton sat down beside him and asked him to explain further. Sha-Tun wondered aloud if it were possible that the flavor of the mulberry did not reside in the berry itself, but rather the taster's tongue, or even their brain. Caton grasped the idea right away and took it further, adding that, by the same way of thinking, the sky was not blue, nor was the mulberry black. The blueness and the blackness were in a person's eye, and the material things had no color at all. Shartoon recalled a girl he had once known who had claimed to be blind to colors. He repeated their idea, and these words would become immortalized in scripture later on. He said,
The sky has no color, the fruit has no taste, and the birds make no sound. There is nothing in this world except that which we perceive.
The two men sat in silent contemplation for a time. Then Shartoon spoke again. He said,
You know, Caton, I can't imagine any version of myself without also imagining some sensation, whether it be a vision, or a sound, or a smell, or a feeling, or some other sense. I cannot imagine my actual self without attaching some experience to the idea. In the absence of experience, I disappear. Perhaps then there is only experience.
Calmly then, he turned to his friend, with his lips stained darkly from the mulberries, and said,
My friend, there is some wisdom to be gained here.
Caton nodded and asked him what he thought it was, to which Shartoon replied,
I'm not sure, but perhaps when I'm old and gray and lying in bed one day, the truth will come to me.
I'm not sure I'm much comforted by your story, Shawnee, said Yellowfly as they continued down the hall. It had continued to run straight, inclining slightly down the whole-way, without any feature or change, while Shawnee spoke. It's not my story, Shawnee returned. And besides, you aren't supposed to be comforted by it. What's it for, then? You're supposed to gain wisdom, Fly. Besides, I think wisdom and good feeling keep little company in this life. Well, I suppose that's true, replied Yellowfly. But I wonder if... Wait. He stopped walking, and the others did as well. There was a sound coming from up ahead. It was soft at first, soft enough to make the companions wonder individually if they were only imagining it. But as they moved further in, it grew louder and louder. Yellowfly caught Jace's eye. The other man said nothing, but simply shook his head in bemused wonder and drew his sword. Yellowfly did the same and led his party onward. Thanks for listening to Tale of the Manticore. If you've enjoyed the show and would like to help to support it, there are lots of ways to do so. You can recommend it online or to friends. You can like and repost episode announcements on social media. You can pick up One Shot in the Dark, the Pendulum World Building Tool, or Encyclopedia Manticorica on DriveThruRPG. And finally, you can rate or review the show on your podcatcher of choice. My thanks to everyone for their support of the show. At this time, please allow me to share one of your very kind reviews. This one was left by Brian Rideout on Podcast Addict. Brian writes, Tale of the Manticore is, hands down, my favorite podcast. It takes the experience of playing old-school Dungeons & Dragons and turns it into a lavish audio novel. It has inspired a whole genre of RPG podcasts for good reason. It definitely changed the way I think of and play D&D and inspired me to get into podcasting myself. Wow, thank you so much, Brian. I don't know where to start. If I've changed the way that you think about RPGs, even just a little bit, well, that's about the nicest compliment I can imagine. Very, very much appreciated, and best of luck with your own podcasting endeavors. I also appreciate the great voice talent I have the pleasure to work with. Team Tumbledye is back in their usual roles of Catsbane, Jace, and Bazoo. My thanks go to Kyellen, Kevin, and Andrew for their ongoing contributions to the show. Also returning as the voice of Shartoon is John Meerdink of Arcane Discoveries. What a voice you've got. So good to have you back, John. For listeners who'd like to get in touch with me, I'm at Manticore Tale on X, or Tale of the Manticore Podcast on Instagram. You can also get in touch by email. I'm at taleofthemanticore@gmail.com. I reply to every message I get. Finally, I keep a blog where I post all kinds of show and RPG-related things. You can find it at taleofthemanticore.blogspot.com. The adventure will continue on the next episode of Tale of the Manticore. It's the story where chaos rolls.
It's been 7 years since the masked court fell and the Empire began dying its final death. Once a member of the elite Imperial Special Service, now turned bounty hunter, Sejana Lushale fights for survival in a universe full of turmoil and confusion. She'll use her wits, her laser pistol, and the power of the void to face the growing tension in the Kassadin system. This is Steve Morrison of the Errant Adventures podcast, and on this new season I'm using the tabletop RPG Traveler to bring to life my own space opera setting, full of bounty hunters, religious zealots, and people struggling to survive and find joy in the dying lights of an intergalactic empire. Join me for this new adventure, and welcome to Book 1, Meridian. I'll see you out in the deep.